All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with Chapter 2, Lesson 4. In the last chapters, we talked about adding and subtracting integers. And now in Lesson 4, we're going to be talking about multiplying and dividing integers. So, look how to find the signs of products. Now, products, that's a special word. Do you remember what the word products means? That means what we're dealing with is multiplication. Okay, and the rules for integers, whenever you're dealing with multiplication, it says the product, that means when you're the answer of a multiplication problem of two integers with the same sign is positive. So if you have a positive number multiplied by another positive number, that means you're going to end up with a positive number. So if you have like 3 times 4 is 12. Okay, there's the same sign, you get the same answer. Also, that's the same with negatives. If you had a negative number times a negative number, a negative times a negative is positive. So whenever you have the same sign, like two positives, your answer is positive. Whenever you have two negatives, your answer is positive. So the same sign is positive. So if we gave a number example, if we went -3 times a -4, a negative times a negative is a positive, and 3 times 4 is just 12. So there you go. That's how that works. Okay, let's move on. The product of two integers with different signs. Let's go ahead. Different signs is always negative. So look here. We're doing multiplication. Product means multiplication. So we have a positive multiplied by a negative is always going to be negative. So if we had something like 3 times a -4, since it's a positive times a negative, our answer is going to be negative, and 3 times 4 would be 12. So the answer would be -12. Or if you have a negative times a positive, the signs are different. It's multiplication. Your answer is going to be negative. So if we had like a -3 times a +4, a negative times a positive is always a negative, and 3 times 4 would be 12. So that's how you figure that out. So that is how you do multiplication. Now, when you do division or quotients, the quotients, means that they're talking about division. They have kind of similar rules as the multiplication. So let's go over them. It says the quotient of two integers with the same sign is always positive. And I hope you're able to see the similarities between those. Same sign with multiplication, it's positive. Same sign with in division, it's positive. So if we have a positive number divided by another positive number, what we end up with is a positive number right there. Same sign, you end up with a positive, just like it says right there. Or if you have the same sign here, a negative divided by a negative, you end up with a positive, just like that. So if you have the same sign, they're both negative, you end up with a positive. So let's look at when we're dealing with quotient. Remember, quotient means we're dealing with division. The division of two integers with different signs, the answer is always negative. And I hope you can see with multiplication, you get the same result, different signs, negative. So it's kind of easy to remember. So if we have a positive divided by a negative, you end up with a negative. Or if you have a negative divided by a positive, you end up with a negative every single time. So whenever they are different signs, like a positive and negative, your answer is going to be negative. Negative and a positive, your answer is going to be negative. So let's go ahead and look at how this plays out in these examples. So it says find each product or quotient. Product is when we're multiplying, quotient is when we're dividing. So let's look at it. We have -5 times 4. So we're multiplying. We have a negative number times a positive. So whenever you have different signs, a negative and a positive, that means your answer is automatically going to be negative. And then you just go 5 times 4, which is 20. And there you go. That's how you get the answer. Okay, let's go into number 2. Number 2, we have 2 times a -8. So we have a positive times a negative again. The signs are different, which means our answer is going to be negative. And then you just go 2 times 8, which is 16. So there you go. All right, let's go into number 3. We have a -1 times a -1. Now here the signs are the same. That means we're going to have a positive answer. So, and then we just go 1 times 1, which is 1. So our answer is 1. Let's go into number 4. It says negative 6 times 3. So we have a negative number times it multiplied by a positive number. So the signs are different, which means the product or the answer to this multiplication is going to be a negative. And then you just do 6 times 3, which is 18. So that's the answer there. Okay, let's do a couple more. What do you think 7 times negative 3? Is it going to be a positive or a negative answer? Well, this is positive, that's negative, so the signs are different, which means your answer in this multiplication is going to be a negative. And then you just go 7 times 3, which is 21. Okay, let's go on to number 6. We have negative 8 times a negative 4. So that's a negative, that's a negative. The signs are the same, which means our answer is going to be positive. And so then you just go 8 times 4, which is 32. All right, let's go on to number 7. We have negative 6 times 5. This is a negative, this is a positive. The signs are different, which means you're going to end up with a negative for your answer. And then you just go 6 times 5, which is 30. Okay, moving on to number 8, we have a negative 9 times a negative 9. Okay, so this is a negative, that's a negative. The signs are the same, which means our answer is going to be positive. So it's just 9 times 9, which is 81. Okay, let's move on to the division portion of this. We have 36 divided by a negative 4. Let's figure out the sign. This is a positive, this is a negative. The signs are different, so we know our answer is going to be negative. Now we just need to figure out, well, what's 36 divided by 4? How many times does 4 go into 36? And it goes in there 9 times, so our answer is negative 9. Let's move on to the next one, 10. Negative 27 divided by 9. We have a negative and a positive. So a negative divided by a positive, the signs are different, which means our answer is going to be negative. So we just need to figure out what's 27 divided by 9. How many times does 9 go into 27? And it goes in 3 times. So our answer is going to be negative 3. Let's move on to number 11. Negative 24 divided by negative 6. So we have a negative and a negative. The signs are the same, which means our answer is going to be positive. So we just need to figure out what is 24 divided by 6. How many times does 6 go into 24? And it goes in 4 times. Let's go ahead and look at this one. Negative 30 divided by 5. So we have a negative number and a positive number. So whenever the signs are different, the answer is going to be negative. And then you just go 30 divided by 5, and that is 6. So our answer is negative 6. Let's move on to number 13. We have 18 divided by 6, and 6 goes into 18 3 times. So that one's pretty straightforward. Number 14, 32 divided by negative 8. We have a positive divided by a negative. Whenever you have division and the signs are different, that means your answer is going to be negative. So then you just need to figure out, well, hey, what's 32 divided by 8? How many times does 8 go into 32? And it goes in 4 times. So our answer is negative 4. All right, on to 15. We have negative 45 divided by 9. So we have a negative and a positive. Whenever the signs are different, that means your answer is going to be negative. 45 divided by 9 would end up being 5. 9 goes in there 5 times, so our answer is negative 5. Number 16, we have negative 40 divided by negative 10. So we have a negative divided by another negative. The signs are the same, so those end up, since the signs are the same, our answer ends up being positive. So we basically have 40 divided by 10. 10 goes into 40 4 times, and that would be our answer. So those are kind of how that works. So now what I want you to do is I want you to work on this right here. Chapter 2, Integers and Rational Numbers, Lesson 4, Multiplying and Dividing Integers. So this whole thing has quite a few problems. Okay, so I just want you to work on those. Go ahead and pause, and you can kind of work through these. You can press play when you're ready, and then kind of see how you did for a couple, and then press pause again, and then press play, and then I want you to kind of check your answers and see how you do. So go ahead and pause. When you get through a couple, press play, and then see how you did. All right, see you in a bit. Bye-bye. All right, let's go ahead and figure out what these products are. So number 1, we have 6 times a negative 1. Positive and a negative, the signs are different, so it's going to be a negative. 6 times 1 is 6. The answer is negative 6. Okay, number 2, we have a negative multiplied by a positive. That means our answer is going to be negative. 4 times 2 is 8, so the answer is negative 8. Okay, the next one, number 3, we have negative 3 times negative 4. This is a negative, this is a negative. The negatives become positive. So we have 3 times 4, which is 12. We have a negative 2 times a positive 8. A negative times a positive is always a negative. 2 times 8 is 16. So that is the answer. Let's go number 5. 5 times negative 7. So we have a positive times a negative, which is a negative. 5 times 7 is 35. So there you go. On to number 6. We have a negative multiplied by a positive. A negative times a positive is they have signs that are different, which means it's going to be a negative sign. 7 times 9 is 63. Okay, number 7, 8 times 4, both positive, pretty straightforward. 8 times 4 is 32. Number 8, negative 3 times a negative 5. They're both negative, and those two negatives end up being positive. So it's, they have the same sign, so the answer is going to be positive. So it's basically just 3 times 5, which is 15. Okay, let's move on to number 9. Okay, we have a negative 5 times a negative 5. Those two have the same sign, so a negative times a negative is a positive. So our answer is going to be positive. 5 times 5 is 25. Let's move on to number 10. 8 times negative 4. So we have a positive multiplied by a negative. Their signs are different, so we have a negative. And 8 times 4 is 32. Here we go with 11. We have a negative multiplied by a negative. A negative times a negative is a positive. So 7 times 6 is 42. Number 10, 9 times a negative 8. This is positive, that's negative. So whenever you have a positive times a negative, your answer is going to be negative. And then you just go 9 times 8 is 72. Okay, let's move on to number 13. Says 1 times negative 7. So you have a positive times a negative, which is going to be a negative. 1 times 7 is 7. All right, number 14. We have a negative 4 times a negative 5. That's a negative times a negative, which is a positive. So I just like to make them positive. That's just what I like to do. And then 4 times 5 is just 20. Here we go with 15. Negative 6 times 3. So that's a negative times a positive, which means our answer is going to be negative. 6 times 3 is 18. All right, let's go into 16. We have a negative 7 times a negative 7. So a negative times a negative is a positive. 7 times 7 is 49. Let's go on to number 17. It says find each quotient. So we have a positive divided by a negative. The signs are different. That means our answer is going to be negative. 12 divided by 4 is 3. Please make sure that you're doing these problems ahead of time and you're not just copying them down with me. That does not help you. You have to do these problems on your own, then press play and check and see how you did. Okay, moving on to number 18. So we have negative 15 divided by negative 3. So it's a negative divided by a negative, which means they're both going to be positive. 15 divided by 3 is 5. 19, we got a negative divided by a positive. That means our answer is going to be negative. 20 divided by 5 is 4. So the answer is negative 4. 20, we have negative 27 divided by negative 9. So it's a negative divided by a negative, which actually ends up being a positive. And we have 27 divided by 9, which ends up being 3. Okay, problem number 21. Negative 45 divided by negative 5. So it's a negative divided by a negative. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. And 45 divided by 5 is 9. So the answer is a positive 9. 22. Here, the signs are different. That's a negative and a positive. So we know automatically our answer is going to be negative. 18 divided by 9 is 2. Here, number 23, I got a positive and negative again. So my answer is going to be negative. So this is 24 divided by 4, which is 6. Sometimes I just like to look at them and figure out what the positive or negative is going to be first before I actually do calculations. This one's easy because they're both positive, so it's going to be positive. 24, 32 divided by 4. 4 goes in there 8 times, so the answer is 8. 25 is 21 divided by 3. 3 goes in there to 21 7 times, so the answer is 7. Here we go. This is a good example. So we have a negative divided by a negative. I know a negative, when you have the same side, it ends up being a positive. So I'm just going to make them both positive. and it's 36 divided by 4, which is 9. Okay, on to the next one, 27. 16 divided by negative 4. We have a positive divided by a negative, and a positive divided by a negative is actually going to be, the signs are different, so it's going to be a negative. And 16 divided by 4 is 4. So we end up with negative 4. 28. We have negative 56 divided by 8. So we have a negative and a positive, so our answer is negative. 56 divided by 8 actually ends up being 7. So our answer is negative 7. Okay, on to the last row. We have negative 42 divided by 7. So it's a negative divided by a positive. The signs are different, so we know our answer is going to be negative. 42 divided by 7 is 6. So our answer is negative 6. Okay, number 30. We have negative 30 divided by negative 6. That's a negative divided by a negative. When they're the same sign, they end up being positive. So I'm just going to make a positive there. And then 30 divided by 6, 6 goes into 35 times, so our answer is 5. 31, 27 divided by 9, pretty straightforward. 9 goes into 27 3 times. And 32. 32 is tricky. Why are they trying to trick us? 25 divided by 0. Nothing can be divided by 0, so this is a tricky one. You would also write this as 20 over 0 like that. Whenever there's a 0 on the bottom part of the fraction, the answer is undefined. It's impossible. You can't do it. So that's kind of a tricky one. They threw that one in for the grand finale. So if you got all those right, or some of them right, or most of them right, great job. If you didn't, go ahead and ask for help, okay? You got to make sure you know how to do this. So I will see you next time. Great job. Okay, bye-bye. Bye-bye. See you later. Bye.